Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ordinary Council Meeting 4539 of Hunters Hill Council. Can I ask you all to please be upstanding? I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, of elders past, present and emerging. The General Manager will read the prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us, to the common good and as in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Okay, please be seated. The proceedings of all council meetings in open session, including all debate and addresses by the public, are recorded and webcast live on council's website for the purpose of facilitating community access. Webcast archives are stored and available to the public on council's website. The recordings may be disclosed under the provisions of the Government Information Public Access Act, the GIPA Act. Members of the public attending a council meeting may have their image, voice and personal information, including name and address, recorded, publicly broadcast and archived, or as an observer or other interested party, members of the public consent to the use of their image, voice and personal information. Councillors, there are no apologies. Are there any declarations of interest? If not, we'll move to item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes of Ordinary Council Meeting 4538 held 28 October 2024. Moves Councillor Williams.
Yeah, okay.
Seconded Councillor Kassab.
I have a question.
Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the last meeting, I requested that, in accordance with the meeting practice, that we should include the voting block for item 8.3. That block hasn't been included in these minutes.
Okay.
I think it's important. It's the only voting block not there.
That's we'll rectify that in the record. Thank you, Councillor.
It needs to actually be fully included in the paper copy.
Yep,
the second question I've got is that, again, it's a procedural thing. Throughout the document, in several locations, it says councillors didn't vote. I noticed that there's a councillor that went out and came back again, and that's fine. But on page 5 and 6, it says for the top voting block, Mayor Miles, Councillor Lane and Councillor Tennis-Sleeman did not vote. My understanding of the minutes is that if you don't vote, then it's a negative. So I'm not quite sure, and that appears on the next page, page 7 as well. So somehow we're crept into the process of not making sure everybody's hands been up.
Yeah, I'll check that with the General Manager, Councillor, and we'll potentially go back and watch the video footage. Obviously, they're all recorded live, so and they are on YouTube. General Manager.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Williams is correct. If a council opts not to vote, it's seen as a negative vote or a no vote. So it's a technicality. The world will not be ending by stating did not vote, but for future reference, we will put it as a no.
But sorry, Councillor Lane, through the chair, please.
Sure.
Yes.
Just to that point, it has me as not voting on a motion that I moved. I'm pretty sure I would have voted.
Councillor Lane, could you stand up when you're asking questions, please?
Sure. If you could just watch the video in relation to 3.3.
Yes. We'll go back and check that. Obviously, there was General Manager wasn't in attendance at that last meeting, so we'll have the records checked prior to. Councillors, any other questions? If not, debate, discussions. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That is carried unanimously. I'll now move councillors to item 2.1, which is a mayoral minute pertaining to the passing of Greg Turner. So mayoral minutes, I'll read the report. It's with sadness that we recognise the passing of long-time local journalist Greg Turner on the 29th of October 2024, aged 64 years. Born on 20th of November 1959, Gregory grew up in Sydney and most recently lived in Ashfield. Gregory has been with the local newspaper, The Weekly Times, since 2010, following his service as a war correspondent with SBS TV during the Croatia versus Serbia conflict. One of his favourite weekly contributions was the Cat of the Week feature, which highlighted the important work of the World League of the Protection of Animals in Gladesville. His commitment to the safety of cats earned him a WLPA Compassion Award. Gregory helped transform the lives of many cats by helping them find safe homes through his column. The WLPA said that they received plenty of warm feedback from the articles, with many readers noting that their lives have been enriched from the joy and companionship that they felt through their pets. During his career, he was a familiar presence at the Ryde Hunters Hill Council meetings and reported widely on a range of community news. Gregory was a great supporter of many local community groups, including the Hunters Hill and Gladesville RSL sub-branches, and was a strong supporter of veterans groups across Ryde and Hunters Hill. He was also a strong supporter of the Hunters Hill Rugby Club and the Hunters Hill Historical Society, which he highlighted through his regular columns. Greg was also a devoted man of faith and cherished his friendships in local churches and religious charities. He had close connection with Father Greg Morgan at St Charles Romlow Church in Ryde and the late Father Kevin Bates of the Holy Name of Mary Parish here in Hunters Hill. His family and friends and colleagues paid their respects to Greg at his funeral, which was held at the St Charles Romeo Church in Ryde on Thursday, the 21st of November 2024. Newspaper tributes described him as a kind-hearted person, always helping others and spending lots of time at the church. His legacy and contributions to the community live through his work, faith and his family. Councillors, are there any other speakers to this mayoral minute? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I knew Greg over a rather long period of time, both before coming back on council and during council. And he was a quietly spoken gentleman. He was always kind and always interested in what was going on. He was a highly skilled as a journalist and a photographer, and something that I wasn't appreciating was his background in photography. It was excellent. His reporting was insightful and fair, a strong supporter of issues in Hunters Hill, always willing to listen and communicate with councillors about concerns and the community as a whole. He will be missed as a voice of reason in presenting issues impacting our community.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other speakers? Councillor Kassab.
I've known Greg since I was about 14 years old, back when I was involved quite heavily with Ryde Council and then obviously over the years. And I think I echo Councillor Williams' words. He was quite a quiet and spoken man, but was very caring and very genuine about the work that he did, and would always have time for everybody, and was quite famously known for his signature satchel that he would always carry to every meeting to do his journalism work. So it was lovely to be present at his celebration of life with his family, and to hear the many stories about Greg. And I wish my condolences to his family and friends.
Thank you, Councillor Kassab. Any other speakers to the mayoral minute? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. We now move to item 4.1. There's a number of speakers to this item, and I will call in order the first speaker, Lucy Cray, to the podium. Thank you, Lucy. You have 3 minutes.
Do I need a microphone?
That's the microphone in front of you.
I know that, but do it. My voice will be loud enough, I think.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am dismayed that a key point made in my objection to the sale of 16C Vernon Street, namely the Aboriginal significance of the site, was dismissed with a cut and paste response by council. I was given no assurances that traditional custodians of the Vernon Street site have been consulted and whether they agree that this land is surplus. I have subsequently been in contact with the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council to discuss this issue. They requested that I set out my concerns to them in writing for further investigation, which I have done and which I will follow up on. You all know where the Vernon Street site is, on the four shores of the Lane Cove River. Aboriginal occupation along the Lane Cove River is well documented in the report Aboriginal Prehistoric Sites by Val Attenborough, dated November 1983. It must be assumed this report is the most complete, up-to-date and representative information Council has on the topic of Aboriginal heritage in Hunters Hill, as it is the only reference document posted on Council's website in relation to that topic. This study from 1983 covers sites in Council's ownership at the time, including the Ferdinand Street Reserve and the Mornington Reserve. Rock art, middens, axe grinding grooves and other evidence of Aboriginal life along the Lane Cove River are discussed. Although contiguous with the Mornington Reserve, the Vernon Street site was not investigated at this time because in 1983 it was private land. However, it is reasonable to expect, considering its features and topography, that this site, and I might add the Serpentine Road Reserve adjoining, is of Aboriginal archaeological potential. For many reasons, including a duty of care to the Aboriginal and wider community and due diligence under the National Parks and Wildlife Act, Council must conduct an investigation of the Vernon Street site for Aboriginal archaeology before deciding this land is of no social, cultural or community value and can be disposed of. But Aboriginal significance means more than archaeology, and today includes the idea of an Indigenous connection to land, waters and sky or country. Even should this site at Vernon Street have no Aboriginal archaeological value, there is an obligation to engage with the Aboriginal community in good faith, to understand the importance of this as a place, before assuming it is no importance to them. Council's Reconciliation Action Plan includes integrating respect for and relationships with traditional owners through all existing and future strategic documents, this is a quote, and council planning processes, further asserting that everything Hunters Hill Council does is underpinned by social and cultural planning. I unfortunately see little evidence of sound cultural planning, nor the good intentions of the RAP playing out in the particular planning process being discussed tonight and the disposal of land at Vernon Street.
Sorry, Ms. Cray, are you almost finished? Or
Almost.
Almost.
Yeah.
Extension of kind, Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor
guys.
Prieston. All those in favour? Against?
Thank you.
That's carried.
It's not possible to vote on the surplus nature of the Vernon Street site until its status in terms of Aboriginal archaeology is known, and traditional custodians are respectfully consulted, which means in advance, not after the fact, their stories listened to and their opinion received on whether they think this is just a piece of surplus land that has no value. And on a more positive note, perhaps the opportunities they see with use and interpretation. Until these actions can be confirmed, I'm afraid Council is in danger of making assumptions about what the Aboriginal community want, or worse, making decisions on their behalf, which we all know is the very antithesis of the spirit of reconciliation.
Thank you, Ms. Cray. If you just hold on there for one moment, I'm just going to ask if councillors have any questions. Councillors, any questions of Ms. Cray? No? Off the hook. Thank you. I'll now call our second speaker, Alastair Sharp, to the podium. Thank you, Alastair. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. The purpose of the report, item 4.1, is stated to be to consider the submissions received in response to the public notice. And the report contains copies of every submission and also a transcript in extremely small type, to every one of which is attached a few words of comment, basically copy and paste, and the statement, this submission is not sustained. In other words, you're being asked to judge public response with a note, sorry, you're being asked to make a decision on something which has already been marked, this submission is not sustained. This seems like a very strange way of making the conclusion and then finding the argument to justify it. I've read all the submissions. There's 65, I counted, not 62. And notice that virtually everyone rejects council's proposal. In other words, they reject what's on the paper tonight. Several of them argue that council should never dispose of land to fund operational expenses, but only to fund specific capital works. I think that's a great idea, and I think that should be added into the policy. One of them pointed out that the sale of specific sites to a single person or neighbour, such as a shared back lane, automatically disadvantages all of the other ones, and so it's not appropriate to go ahead with that particular item, one of the 4 items. And several of them simply commented that there is not sufficient information to be able to form an opinion. But there wasn't a single person who said they agreed with the proposal on the business paper tonight. 65 people responded, and not one of them is supporting your proposal. Council said to have a list of 50 items of remnant land, a list that's never been made available in spite of people having asked for it. And we read tonight in the business paper that there's been some sort of review of this list, the result of which has not been released. And somehow 4 items have been picked out from the list without explaining why those particular 4 have been considered. They're a very strange 4 because they have nothing in common with each other. I just get nervous when things like this are done in back rooms. It suggests that the process is not fair income. I'm particularly disturbed at this comment. This submission is not.
Sorry, Dr. Sharp moved extension of time. Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Lane. All those for, against. So I'll do that again. All those for, against. That is carried. You have another 2 minutes.
I'm particularly disturbed at the comment, this submission is not sustained. I've never seen this used in council meetings before. And it's written against every single one of the submissions, including the one that was actually supporting the motion on the floor tonight. That was also not sustained. I was also a bit upset at the idea of printing anything on a business paper in such small print that people with eyesight less acute than I have would be unable to read it. In conclusion, council has rejected every single submission, even the ones that have full or partial support. Even there's several who said there's not sufficient information presented to be able to make a comment. Not a single one of the 65 supports the proposed resolution as stated. Some raise the principle that assets should never be sold to fund operational expenses. Something I think is so important. It's selling the family silver to pay the milkman or whatever the expression is. I can't believe that council should still consider the resolution, and I think it should be dropped without taking a vote.
Thank you, Dr. Sharp.
Thank you.
Councillors, any questions? Councillor Prieston.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alistair. I just have a question. In your statement, you suggest each of the 4 items being considered in the business paper are dissimilar. Would you treat the 4 of them differently? In that case, is there a way that you would treat different parcels of land?
Oh, absolutely, because
the remnant lands.
Absolutely. I think one of them is so small that almost certainly the sale will not cover the cost of selling it. And that's written into the policy.
Okay.
So yes, the answer is yes, I would.
But you would consider them all in light of the policy that was passed by council in its last term, and then treat them differently.
No, I would treat them in accordance with the policy. Right, there is an item in the policy that says the cost has to be, the return has to be greater than the cost of the process.
Yes, understood. Thank you.
Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Vergara.
The point of clarification, Dr. Sharp said that council's determined that the submission's not sustained.
Let's just speak a little
Sorry,
louder. I can hear that.
Dr. Sharp, it's not interactive. Yes, sorry, councillor.
Clarify, that's the view of the director at this stage. Council hasn't resolved to accept or reject any of these submissions. Is that right?
It is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Dr. Sharp? Councillors? If not, thank you, Dr. Sharp. I'll now call our third speaker to the floor, Karen Raisin. Thank you, Karen. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
I need to change glasses. Okay, Karen Raisin is my name, and I'm speaking on behalf of Hunters Hill Trust tonight. It was noted at council meeting 29 July, a review of remnant lands had been undertaken identifying whether 4 obscure parcels listed tonight could be sold as surplus to the current or future needs of council and the local community and have potential for disposal. We wonder where in this decision-making process the current or future needs of local community actually comes into play. We therefore hope, councillors, to convince you tonight to spare one of those land parcels for us, the community, and for future generations to come. Background information states the sale of part of a long-term financial plan, generating income that could be used for operations or asset maintenance costs. And other councils also look to do this, target capital, recycling initiatives, divesting property, non-essential for community needs. Well, we believe this land is essential, and note many in the community in their submissions also agreed that the selling of Vernon Street property for operational costs is not really the way to go. One parcel up on the list is only 14 square metres, listed on council's land register as community land, waterfront, 22 to 24 Gale Street. We weren't able to find the listings for the laneway on that register for 14 and 16 Wyballina Road, 88 square metres, nor the 17 square metres adjoining Church Street. We did, however, find the 527 square metres at lot 3116C Vernon Street, and it's listed as operational, and it is by far the biggest parcel, and seemingly at odds with the characterisation of remnant for the other 3. The Trust holds a position that the sale of remnant land needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. However, we struggle to understand why Council has put these particular 4 together as a starting point to sell off land. The July report notes, typically, these remnants are unable to be used on their own, and if sold, usually have value to one adjoining owner only. We very much dispute this being the case with lot 31 Vernon Street, nor the assertion that this land can only be accessed by the adjoining owner. Selling off 14 or 17 square metres of land that is unusual to benefit the community is not really a big deal. However, extending an existing adjoining landholding with another 527 square metres of riverfront foreshore with rocky outcrops, a sandy beach, a boat shed is entirely another matter.
Sorry, Karen. Move an extension of time. Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Tennis-Sleeman. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried.
I don't like those glasses
Sorry,
anymore.
another 2 minutes.
Okay. Its true value to be retained by the community for future needs and future generational use just can't be underestimated. Surely Council could also view this foreshore land in Vernon Street as an ongoing asset, with ever-increasing potential returns given the ever-increasing rise of land values in Sydney. While the foreshore building line may prohibit development, the added meterage to the existing adjoining block will create advantages in investment returns for the landholder and potentially an opportunity for another dwelling. More importantly, this land already, where the ratepayers are concerned, of Hunters Hill, it owes almost a huge return given the price our council paid in 2005 to compulsorily acquire it. Council spent $2.515 million in compensation payment following a legal battle with the adjoining owner, who they now look poised to sell back to. Some might say this is absolute madness. It's also very maddening to think this valuable asset has been allowed to sit idle by council for 20 years without any infrastructure, a pathway, stair or signage to encourage public use. This land is in an historic and heritage conservation area, once part of the Mornington estate. Mornington House, a locally listed heritage item at 16 Vernon Street, and is in an area listed to visit by bushwalkingnewsouthwales.com as part of the Great North Walk, which is signposted along with Mornington Reserve. It's been acknowledged of the 62 submissions received, the majority were concerned with the sale of this particular land. So surely, councillors, this tells you that the community really wants to retain this land, not make a quick buck today, which will forever deny public continued access to such a precious site. We're sincerely hoping that there may still be some flexibility for councillors or council to change this outcome. I'm almost there.
Yes, I'll give you an extra 10 seconds.
Okay, well, I'll go to conclude if you like.
Yes.
But just to say that we do disagree with council's assessment, the 3.12 and 3.13. We really do find it disingenuous to deem that land is cost prohibitive, given the millions that council's already spent on the Vernon Street one, and there were no costings for that. We do community consultation, but we don't get all the facts or the figures. So to conclude, Lot 31 Vernon Street is a valuable asset held by council that will only grow in monetary value across future years. The ratepayers paid $2.515 million in 2005 for this land, and we believe it should be retained in council's hands, preserved as an asset of great future public benefit. A grant could even be sought to put in those stairs that make access easier. Hunters Hill Trust considers it is rather short-sighted for council to sell remnant lands for a quick monetary addition at this
I'm
point.
going to have to ask you because I get 10 seconds and you're on about.
But I just want to say that, those before you who preceded councillors, they chose to keep it. And we really think that, we know once it's gone forever. It is an asset, and we hope you'll reconsider again. Thank you.
Karen. If you could just stay at the podium, I'm just going to see if councillors have any questions. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Vergara.
Yeah, where on lot 31 would you put the stairs so that it was accessible to the public?
We're on lot 31. Well, there are easements, and if you go back and read, which I actually did, all the papers from 2005, I think it was the September ordinary meeting, and I've seen actually correspondence there and written in where New South Wales Heritage spoke about when they were looking, council actually was looking at one point back then to actually make some of the unmade road for Serpentine Reserve and add it to the lot 31, and presumably make it residential, which would have been quite an asset. But that didn't sort of happen, and there was a legal process and 3 court hearings and whatever. So I would put those stairs either where the easement is now or where that you go down through the Serpentine Road Reserve, and just because it is quite steep at the bottom.
So nowhere from lot 31, you have to do it on Serpentine is what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, look, to be honest, I'm not a surveyor. I am not aware of where land boundaries are. It's a difficult site. So obviously council would be best to learn and know that. But the fact is that it is accessible. And it was always meant to be accessible, and there's evidence where they talked about keeping a pathway open for public access. So in the papers in 2005.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any other questions? Sorry. Yes, Councillor Vergara.
Where's this easement?
To the Director of Planning. My understanding is that that is a private easement for vehicle access, not a public easement, but I'm going to let you clarify.
There are some stairs just preceding it.
Just let the Director clarify.
I believe that through you, Mayor, I believe the easement, the only one that I'm aware of, is on lot 32, south of lot 31. The easement is there created through the providing vehicle access for and pedestrian access for the existing lot there at the moment. So that's where the easement is.
I just, I've got a couple of quick questions. So the trust accepts that this was private land prior to 2005, and you're aware that council was forced to purchase this land by the court under the Just Terms Act?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So the council was obliged essentially to spend the
Yeah.
$2.515 million to purchase the land from the adjoining landholder.
And I'm also aware that, to answer your question, that it was also mentioned, as I said as was in the submission submitted by the trust, when Lisa Miss Campbell was there, that it was part of this financial future where for Pittwater Road, Serpentine Road Reserve could be aggregated. I think they used the word.
Yeah,
So it's something that's been around for quite some time.
It's been around for 20 odd years.
That's right.
Unrectified. Does the trust accept, and I know it's hard to speak on their behalf, but you're their representatives here.
Yes.
There's an obelisk, there's a boat shed. From a heritage perspective, it probably could be argued that that land had traditionally belonged to Mornington, because they were embellishments that Mornington, as a heritage item, had made to those properties prior to council being forced to purchase the property. How does the trust view the fact that those sites were a part of this historic estate in Hunters Hill, as traditionally, that now it's essentially saying that its historical position or heritage position is that it shouldn't be part of that estate anymore? Because traditionally the trust has always been against subdividing property or carving
Well, I
pieces of
wasn't
property
around then,
out.
and the subdivisions happened quite some time ago. And progressively, my understanding is that they had arranged, and council actually had some kind of a agreement with the purchaser of one of the subdivisions to have an access pathway to the public. And this was maintained over a certain period of time, is my understanding. So
The issue with that, Karen, is that the directors just said that there's only one private easement over the property.
If I can ask a question on that.
Councillor, I'm just asking the question of Karen.
Well, look, as I said to you earlier, Mayor, I'm not an expert on this. I don't particularly know where all the boundaries are, but I have done enough research to know that it is accessible by the public to get to that area, and indeed is access. There's no signage that I could see, and there was no. There were stairs that were very old, and it was like walking down a side path.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Lane.
Through you to the Director of Planning. As you've read all of the submissions, Director, could you just look at the map on page 53 and the map on page 75? I believe you're referring to the easement on page 53 to 32, which is distinct from the pathway that's shown on the submission in page 75. And with the benefit of that recollection, do you want to amend that comment about the no public access?
No, I'm aware. No, he doesn't wish to correct that.
I stand by the report.
Thank you. Sorry, Karen. Any other questions, councillors? No, thank you. I will call our next speaker, David Griffith. Thank you, David. You have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Good evening. I've got a terrible cold, so you'll have to excuse me if I'm a bit husky. Look, I'm a resident ratepayer of Hunters Hill over 40 years, and I live in Vernon Street. I'm here to address you regarding the proposed sale of 16 Vernon Street only. I lodged an objection along with the 60 plus other objectors in response to council advertisement to sell this land, along with the other parcels of remnant or surplus land. The fact that over 60 people have lodged an objection shows the level of community distress regarding this proposal. It's all the more incredible, bearing in mind the misleading and deceptive representation of this 527 square metre block of land. The advertisement stated that the land is only accessible by the adjoining neighbour. This is wrong. The whole world can freely access this block of land via the unmade part of Serpentine Road. Also, there are two neighbours who have a common boundary with 16C, not 1. Water access, that is from the Lane Cove River, is also easily accessible by landing on one of the 2 beaches which abut 16C. There's no mention of the very large boat shed, which is part of 16C, as well as part of the wet lease to Transport for New South Wales, which apparently the council didn't even know it had. This boat shed is an incredibly valuable feature of 16C. It alone would add over millions of dollars to the value of 16C. It can easily be used for community activities and is a perfect shed for kayakers. It's a huge shed. You could easily put 20 to 30 kayaks within it. To access 16C from Vernon Street, it's a simple matter and, of course, should be improved by a rudimentary walkway and stairs as a commonplace throughout our reserves. So why were these important aspects of 16C not included in, let alone highlighted? This is of great concern. I'm sure if enough members of the community were aware of all these facts, there would have been many more objections lodged to this proposal. After acquiring this land some 20 years ago, the council should have spent the small amount needed to provide easy access down Serpentine for various reasons that was not addressed. The land was recently cleared by someone, which has been very helpful in providing access. And I urge the council to proceed now to construct a simple path from Vernon Street to the level below the monument so the public can enjoy the wonderful vistas down the Lane Cove River and onto the beaches. Has council also considered other possible partners in this? As the Upper Serpentine and Vernon Street are part of the Great North Walk, the state government may well be interested in assisting with making an interesting spur off the Great North
Sorry,
Walk.
David. Councillors, anyone for a moving extension of time? Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Ternese-Sleeman. All those in favour? Against? That is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
So that the thousands of Australians and international users of the Great North Walk can enjoy this little side diversion. The current 2 neighbours with common boundaries are free today to use 16C Vernon Street land and access the beaches as are any other member of the public. So no one is presently being deprived of accessing this wonderful green space and waterfront. The sale of 16C will inherently exclude all other members of our community from accessing this land forever. How can there be any balance relating to the present and future generations in this consideration? And how does this proposal fit within the community plan on the council's website, which highlights protecting open space and waterfront access? Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillors, any questions of David? Councillor Vergara.
And Mr. Griffin, a financial imperative of yours justified the Frankenstein subdivision of this estate with significant heritage value in a way that, 1, created a lot in breach of the minimum lot size, and 2, destroyed heritage sandstone steps that provided legal access to the foreshore and boat shed. Yet this proposal is, what do you call it? Misguided. So my question is...
Sorry, what was the statement you said I made?
No statement. The question is, do you not see the hypocrisy in your submission?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. Your first...
Question.
Withdraw the question. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, any other questions? Thank you, David. I now call our second last speaker, Jim Sanderson, to the podium. Thank you. You have 3 minutes, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If the proposed land sale proceeds against the clear expressed wishes of the Huntersville community, then I would question what is happening to the local democracy we have fought so hard for. If the proposed sale are part of a broader scheme, then that scheme must be explained. Although it would appear the sale is merely for the to raise funds for continuing operations, clearly this is unsustainable. I'm staggered that Council's response to most of the submissions is effectively that Council is following a policy that I never agreed to, and the submission is not sustained. Council has a duty to duly consider all submissions this hasn't occurred. If submissions were not up to scratch, then I believe it was significantly due to the deficiencies in the report to respond to. The process to sell these lands commenced with a report to council in July, with a table that dutifully ticked off 10 points in a council policy, coming to the same conclusion for the same reasons for 4 quite different pieces of land that were potentially surplus. Apart from the errors in these conclusions, which Mr. Griffith in particular has addressed, the report failed to understand that the policy itself lists the list of matters to have regard to in clause 3.1 is not exhaustive. Other matters have to have regard to include federal and state policy, in particular policy relating to the protection and creation of public space and access to foreshores. These include the Biodiversity and Conservation SEP and the Sydney Harbour Foreshores Waterways Area DCP 2005, which is still relevant and in force. I note in my submission that the proposal to sell 16C Vernon Street is completely at odds with the planning principles of this DCP. All of the potential proposals or disposals are within the Peninsula Heritage Conservation Area, which makes historical context even more important. When local heritage item I-335 Mornington was built in 1905, it stood on land that included everything from the unmade Serpentine Road to Mornington Reserve. The original owners of Mornington granted the right-of-way from Vernon Street to the former Mornington Wharf. This remains as an 8-foot wide path to access the eastern end of...
Sorry, Jim. Councillors, do we have an extension of time? Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Ternouth-Sleeman. All those in favour? Against? That is carried.
Right.
2 minutes. Yeah.
Good, I should make that. With regard to the 8-foot wide path, this remains part or remains there, as well as providing the access and is part of the Great North Walk. Other point I'd make is that a circa 1980 subdivision saw a small area of foreshore land adjacent to the path gifted to council as a public reserve, and rights of way created to allow public access from Mornington Reserve along the Lane Cove River foreshore to Serpentine Road. That much of this access route around the foreshore was gifted to council, I believe obliges council to retain this access. Legal action commenced, which has been mentioned before, which resulted in council paying compensation to the owners of Mornington for a little over 2.5 million. Now it's proposed to sell this lot, I think has been mentioned before, back to the same owners who I doubt will pay that amount in 2024 dollars. Until the recent history, the history of the land surrounding Mornington has been to keep it accessible, open space, noting that the last EBD street directory I purchased shows access up to lot 31 via an unmade section of Serpentine Road. Unfortunately, access to and use of lot 31 has reduced, in part because of the fencing off of a right-of-way below 16A Vernon Street. Rather than using encroachments and onto public land and blocking of access to public rights of way as an excuse to sell off land, these encroachments and blockages should be cleared to enhance the access to these spaces, so that our community has expressly expressed its value through its emphatic and clear voice that these sales should be
Sorry,
proceed.
Jim, are you
Finished.
done? Oh, perfect timing. Well done. Councillors, any questions of Jim? No? Okay, thank you, Jim. Our last speaker to this item is Mr. Simon Frame. Thank you, Simon. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mindful that the recommendation is merely to further investigate this matter in a report and with all the usual requirements of public notice and transparency along the way, etc., I speak in favour of the motion. You've all read the agenda item, and I think to a great extent its wisdom speaks for itself. For those of us who genuinely wish to see Hunters Hill remain a viable and independent local government area, I think that it is only right that Council regularly reviews its assets, of which land, not unlike Crown land, is public land. The idea that these things should be forever off the table is myopic and not a responsible course, but perhaps unsurprisingly to be expected of certain reactionary mindsets. I do have to say that I oppose the idea of parcels of land being clumped together in terms of such reviews, and would hope, with regards to any actual disposal, they are considered on a case-by-case manner. I have no reason to think that that won't happen, by the way, but I just wanted to note that for the record. I am particularly concerned about achieving a final decades-long resolution to the Vernon Street matter. The site was the subject of a very questionable compulsory acquisition back in the day. I know that because I was around here then. I'm no fan of compulsory acquisitions, more so in the idea that an individual or family is compelled by the power of the state or government to give over land, even if recompensed, albeit often to their disadvantage. Further to my views on that, the site at Vernon Street is completely inaccessible to the public by land. That's the facts. Anyone who doesn't believe that should go down there, and unless you're a Cirque du Soleil performer, you will have a lot of trouble getting down there. The observations that it's accessible by boat are both trite and contrived. If this land was as valuable a public amenity as is alleged, then why did no one who spoke here tonight against the site, even being considered for sale, ever raise the genuine problems with public access to it over the 2 decades that it's been in council hands? Why did they never lobby council to get it cleaned up and accessible? Admittedly, the cost of doing so now, I would imagine, would be far too onerous on ratepayers, but I would allege the opposition speaks to a lack of consistency, perhaps even authenticity, on this subject. The people of Hunters Hill want a progressive and financially viable council now and into the future, and they've proven that time and again, both during our fights to maintain council as an independent entity and most recently at the ballot box. Those voting tonight need to be mindful of that.
Thank you, Simon. Councillors, any questions of Simon? Sorry, Tatiana. Councillor Vergara, sorry.
Thank you, former Councillor Frame. You mentioned consistency and inauthenticity. Could you just elaborate on what you meant by that?
Well, there is a vast swathe of Hunters Hill land that is currently going through a due process, a claim from a land council, and it like this deserves to go through, get a report, get community comment and all that sort of thing. But many of the people who are speaking here tonight against the removal of this public land, as they said, have been stone cold silent on the other subject. Now that goes for the trust as well. I have not seen anything from them regarding this matter. I'm willing to happily stand to be corrected, but I'm looking for consistency and authenticity, and I'm not finding it amongst the objectors.
Is it
Councillor Vergara.
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, councillors, any other questions of Mr. Frame? If not, thank you.
No, I think Councillor.
Sorry, Councillor Tinsley, you got a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Miles. I've just got a couple of comments in response to your sort of questions. It's more of a clarification.
Sorry, you can ask Simon for a clarification. Comments will be left to the debate.
Okay, I'll leave it for the debate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Councillors, we have a motion in the paper. Is there a mover? Moved. Councillor Tanous-Sleeman, seconded. Councillor Kassab. Councillor Tanous-Sleeman, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor Miles.
Sorry, Councillor. Yeah. Sorry, councillors, you would have noticed just before we enter debate now, it has been moved and seconded. We have received, and you all have a copy of a letter from the Office of Local Government, which we will table into the record as per their request. Councillor Tanous-Sleeman, please speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mayor Miles.
Thank you.
I can confirm that I've read the 60+ submissions received by council, specifically in relation to 16C Vernon Street, lot 31. I can also confirm that I visited the location on a number of occasions, both in my role as a councillor and then as my role as a parent. I should also say that upon the second visit, I decided not to take my children down, given that there were significant safety issues. Now, here are my observations. 16C Vernon Lot 31 is severely constrained with no defined pedestrian access and is unsafe. It offers neither utility nor benefit in its retention and embellishment on a standalone basis. The optimum outcome is a sale to consolidate the remnant portion. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1993, councils are required to follow principles of sound financial management. Councils must ensure its spending is reasonable and sustainable, undertake responsible and sustainable investments in infrastructure for the benefits of the local community, implement effective financial and asset management, and have regard to achieving intergenerational equity. The sale of the remnant land portion presents the only opportunity to achieve an integrated and financially sustainable outcome. I want to also bring to your attention in 2022-23, council operating performance ratio results range from a negative 12.99% to a minus 4.81% to a current minus 5.34%. Whilst this is an improvement to the current previous periods, we are still operating well under the benchmark of 0% or greater. The operating performance ratio measures a council's achievement in obtaining in containing operating expenditure within operating income. The benchmark for this ratio is 0% or greater. Councils are encouraged to budget for surplus results and to take into account the condition and maintenance requirements of assets in this process. In summarising, under clause 3.31 of council disposal of council land policy, I agree to pass a resolution in respect of 4 identified parcels of council land.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Vergara. Yes. Yes.
Am I able to move an amendment to the motion if it's acceptable to councillor Sleeman?
You can move an amendment which will then be debated, or if the mover, councillor Sleeman, and the seconder, councillor Kassab, are both comfortable with the amendment, then it can be accepted into the motion, the motion as it is on the floor.
Can I table it for their consideration?
You can, yes.
I'd like to propose that number 2 in the recommendation, Roman numeral 2, be deleted. That is the Church Street corner, Reedy Road, Hunters Hill.
Councillor Sleeman, is that acceptable to you? Yes. Councillor Kassab? Yes, that motion has been amended to delete point 2, Roman numeral 2. Councillors, there's been a speaker for the motion, moved motion. Is there a speaker against the motion? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I've heard a lot tonight that really disturbs me, Mr. Mayor, and I think we've really got to look at how serious the matter is, because you can construe that there's maladministration here, because as we've heard, we've put out information to the community that's wrong.
Councillor, I would urge caution on using that sort of language. You've heard from the General Manager and the Director that the information is not wrong. I think it would be wise to stick to the issues at hand.
Oh, well, could I just bring the General Manager's attention to the fact that he has written to a local resident and informed that local resident that it has partial access. Now, to me, access is access. It either is partial access or not.
You got wish to make comment to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm more than happy to look at that correspondence, but I don't recall ever writing any correspondence to any ratepayer of that fact. I'm very happy to see that correspondence, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Could you just please continue, but be cautious not to make allegations to the staff that can't defend themselves.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. Well, we've heard tonight, and I support strongly the fact that council hasn't gone through the process of discussing this matter or seeking the advice of our Indigenous members of the community. I think it's fundamental to all that was said here tonight. We've also heard that council's basic philosophy around its vision statement within its community strategic plan is that natural spaces, including bushland, urban tree canopy, foreshores, waterways, are protected and enhanced. So what we're talking about here is selling off something that in our vision statement, which we have put together with our community, that is contrary to what I believe the position that council should be taking. Now, we've heard a lot that Vernon Street 16C is not accessible. I find that extraordinary. I've walked down there numerous times. It is not steep to the point of where you turn left to go along through 16C. And there's certainly stairs, very useful stairs, to get down to the beach. There's also a lot of vegetation on the site that's important. There's rocky outcrops that are important. And as we've heard here tonight as well, that there is an important point that is not being considered in the documentation, and that relates to the issue of, one sec, I've got the wrong page. Here we go. Well, that's not the right one. The issue of, I can paraphrase it, the Biodiversity Act and also the foreshores DCP. Council hasn't even considered that in its documentation or discussion. It's important the council get it right before it goes out to public exhibition. The issue of access is clear in my mind. The issue of the need to discuss with the Aboriginal community, the Indigenous community about this land is imperative. The issue about meeting requirements under the state legislation, and the state is very keen to maintain accessible foreshore areas. It sees as very critical into the future. The land is actually misclassified or characterised because it talks about it being operational land, but it's never been used as operational land and can't be. We've had 62 or 5 or whatever it is responses of the community resoundingly rejecting the proposition. And I think it's imperative on council to make sure that they give them more respect in terms of providing more in the response to their submission than what has been provided. Yeah, I've lost the page. Oh no, I haven't. Here it is. Been provided to say that the matter is not. What was those terms used? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway. Yeah. So it's important. The submission is not sustained, is what I was looking for the words. And I think it is important that council address those submissions in a way that respects the concerns of the community. To say they're not sustained and refer back to a previous report under a previous council some months ago, I think is a little bit unfortunate and unfair on the residents concerned. There is an opportunity also to access it, as we've heard, through lot 16A, I think it is, the one down between Mornington Reserve and the site. And there is a right of way established on the plans that I can see that hasn't been explored by council as an access point. The other issue is the boat shed is currently being used. So if it's not accessible, how do people get down there to use the boat shed? It is critical that council be upfront in terms of what the land is capable of and the importance of that land to a range of things apart from just filling a gap in our budget. We should never be using assets to pay for operational budgets. You were at the conference, Mr. Mayor, and you might have heard the Auditor General mention that in his speech on Sunday, that councils need to be very mindful about their operational budgets and they should keep them separate from their asset and capital budgets. To try and use important public land to fill gaps, I think is not the way to go for council. In regards to the other sites, we've heard that the Church Street one has been withdrawn. I'm not quite sure whether that is forever or whether it's just a short-term process. But I thought that was a bit unreasonable to think that that should be sold, to whom I'm not quite sure. It also performed a very useful function in providing tree canopy and also sightlines. And potentially it might even be part of a road reserve. And none of that is disclosed or considered as having merits in the documentation council has provided. We've heard that the one down in Gale Street is 14 square metres. How council can ever make an outcome that's profitable on 14 square metres is not me beat. And then there's the walkway in Bibelina Road, and that has no details as to its history, where it is currently being used or not, and finally, what opportunities there are for the future. So overall, Mr. Mayor, I think the whole process is flawed. It hasn't addressed the issues that it's required to do under the policy that we're using for this. It hasn't considered the merits of access. It hasn't considered the merits of Aboriginal needs. It hasn't considered the merits of foreshore requirements and state government planning instruments. It hasn't considered the importance of the trees on the site. It hasn't considered the importance of the rocky outcrops on the site. It hasn't considered the beach or the boat shed. It didn't even know the boat shed was part of their licensing process. So to me, that is a flawed process. That's a process that council should not proceed with. And as far as the other items, as I've mentioned, they don't relate to this Vernon Street one, and they don't appear to have any merit in an outcome for the community. So we've had a message from the Department of Local Government, which was tabled tonight, but it clearly identifies that it would like more information in relation to the process which council's gone through. And to me, that raises a flag that we need to at least address that prior to making any decision on this tonight. We had the opportunity at the last council meeting. An excellent motion was put forward by Councillor Lunney to get a
Spatial strategy.
That's the one, spatial strategy together, which would have enabled us to look at all our portfolio, the 50 odd locations that are referred to by the council, and make sure that we knew the relationship between them and community needs, relationship between each other, and how best to manage and move forward with those lots. Sale is not, in my mind, an option with many of those locations without having a clear strategy as to the importance community places on them, the importance they are in terms of environmental and heritage aspects of our community. So, Mr. Mayor, there's many reasons why council should not proceed with this tonight. I'm firmly of the belief that the 4 items, or now 3, should not be made surplus to council's needs, as they provide a meaningful and useful outcome for the community. And the information provided to me is inadequate in being able to make those determinations. So I reject the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other speakers for the motion?
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Question, Councillor Vergara.
Just proceeding with this motion, would it impact the zoning, the conservation listing, the heritage, the development controls?
No.
Such that the vegetation, the rocky outcrops and the trees are imminently at risk?
No.
Thank you.
Councillors, any speakers for the motion? Councillor Prieston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And councillors, I'm passionate about broader community outcomes and progressing facilities for the benefit of our community and ensuring that our public spaces are above standard. We deserve what other councils see, and that is new and improved infrastructure for their people. At present, the lot at 16C Vernon, as I've heard today many times, is being predominantly used for private purpose. I understand that a small proportion, perhaps 60 people out of the entire residency of Hunters Hill, have managed to access the site through unfit conditions. However, most locals I canvassed prior to this meeting have never been down there, including myself until this matter was brought before council, and I've lived here for 29 years. I'm cognizant that, and you know, this is a true motivator for me, that we must consider intergenerational equity and opportunity in decision making. I truly believe that any funds raised by the council from the sale of this privately used lot of land predominantly would be better used for new and improved facilities that the broader community can enjoy for generations to come. For example, we need funds to build a proper access way to the new swim site at Bedlam Bay, which is something I know that the director over here knows I'm incredibly passionate about, and something that former councillor Crassoy was very vocal about during our consideration of the report brought to council under the Places to Swim grant that we received. We could not proceed with the full proposal because there was no way that people with disability needs or other, or elderly or young children or someone with a pram could access that site. So that's really important to me. Or we could build a new netball court at Will Park. The list is endless, and I think the councillors, when we do our strategy session for CapEx over the next couple of years of council, will see that the wish list is very long. I'm also comforted by the fact, which was alluded to by Councillor Vergara, that the lot will be preserved as an item of heritage significance by any incoming private owner. So it's not as though there's a proposal to build a structure on this beautiful land that does have Indigenous significance or heritage significance. It's that it is just being predominantly used for a private purpose. And to me, when I weigh it up and on the balance of things, I believe that the funds could be better spent to deliver outcomes for the broader community and the community that might not have an interest in going down to this relatively unsafe and inaccessible lot of land. I also am someone that does not judge other people for their views. I consider it a learning, and I consider that everyone has a different motivator and a different purpose. My purpose is to vouch and I guess promote the items that come before council that might be inaccessible to everyone in the community. And I don't think that the 60 submissions against this proposal are proportionate or representative of broader community views on the matter. So on the balance of things, that's why I'm speaking in favour of the amendment to the motion, and the motion as it stands in the paper bar item 2.
Thank you, councillor. Any speakers against the motion? Councillor Lane.
I'll just start by reading out a couple of sentences from the letter that was tabled for the benefit of people online and here that won't have read it. So one of them is, they say, council will bear in mind that it is the custodian and trustee of public assets, and to effectively account for and manage the assets which it's responsible. And then they ask the council provide a copy of all the documents relating to the sale and a copy of the objections received and a council report considering those objections and outlining, these are the key words, how the council proposes to address and mitigate community concerns. And then they ask for it to be tabled so that everyone is aware of their concerns. I'll come back to that because the three issues that we have here are proper engagement. We have an issue about access, which I think is a key one that, Carol, you've raised, and I agree. And then there's this financial sustainability argument that's also made. So I'll address them all. Firstly, you know, it's great that the stated objective in the paper is about transparent and democratic engagement processes. And, you know, genuine engagement, fortunately, or as it was put in the case, the bounds of a decision maker's discretion has already been well articulated in what's now known as the Gunning principles. And those principles, which we'll talk about today, are that consultation takes place while the proposal is at a formative stage, that means you haven't pre-decided that you're already going to do something. So if you say, for example, in the council report, this has already been, at a previous council and therefore you don't have a chance to respond, that is actually principle 1 that's not being honoured. Principle 2, sufficient reason must be put forward to the proposal to allow for intelligent consideration and response. So you need to be clear of what it is. You'll note that I'm in the objections twice before I joined council because I couldn't find the lot and I actually got the lot wrong originally, mea culpa. Thirdly, adequate time must be given for consideration and response. So fortunately, it was extended, so it wasn't just the election period. And then 4, the product of consultation must be conscientiously taken into account. So rather than that, what we're seeing is us being frog-marched into a process. We've already heard all of the issues with documentation and advertising, and really no effort, in the words of the OLG, to address and mitigate community concerns. And whether we think that 61 or 65 people is not enough, the fact is 100% of people that was responded to, or maybe it was 95, I only saw the 62 that said no, said no. And so it's not actually for us to say there is some hidden mystical community that didn't write to us in the period but do love the site. If we're given 62 submissions and all of those submissions say that they have concerns, that is the basis on which we need to make our decision. Now I'm going to focus on Vernon Street. As you've heard from a lot of the speakers, the motion is technically flawed. You've heard from a number of speakers that the statement that it's unable to be used on its own and having value to only one adjoining owner is not true. I'll specifically take you to the example of Woolwich Marina, which has 2 paths that are unmade roads to lead to the marina. If the argument that's being made is it needs to have a made road as access, then Woolwich Baths is likewise not accessible. If the argument is that it's too steep, then you could just go up the made portion of Serpentine Road, which is much steeper, or for that matter, the only access to Ferdinand Street Reserve. But I think the one that really, really worries me is that the argument seems to be that if we haven't maintained public access and allowed the privatisation of public land, then that itself means that that land can now be sold. And so that means if a staircase falls down at the back of Fairland Hall, the back of Fairland Hall is no longer accessible and can be sold. It means that if we haven't made a public path down the unmade part of Serpentine Road, even though there are funds like the Sharing Sydney Harbour Access Program that allow us to do so or get active grants, then we, although we're the owners of the public road and the lot, are allowing someone to privatise that land. And in terms of, is there anything to worry about the privatisation of public land? As you all saw when you were down there, it's already been half grassed, so I don't accept that there's no danger to the conservation value of that land. And we've already lost an Aboriginal site with rock paintings that was on private land just recently as well. So, I don't think you can take it as read that privatising of public assets is going to maintain its integrity. Now, despite that, we've got a procedural dog's breakfast. There's no financial impact assessment, despite there being a boat shed that has value, that it could be in the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, like we heard, 20 to 30 kayaks, you could put a boat in it, where actually there's a statement, I have to find it, but anyway, anyway, I'll skip that part. I also note, for example, that in the next item, 4.2 on page 153, we made a loss of $500,000 on our last disposal of assets, so we don't really have a track record of actually making money on land. There's no environmental impact assessment. And look, actually, I'll withdraw my comment about the damage to the land because the EPNA Act has an objective, which is ESD, and ESD has 4 principles, which again have been articulated by Justice Biscoe of the LEC. They are the precautionary principle, as well as intergenerational equity, biological diversity, and ecological integrity. And if you read the precautionary principle, it says if you don't know, don't proceed. If we haven't done the study about the environmental impacts, we shouldn't proceed. And that's under the EPNA Act, which we're also supposed to follow. And as Ross talked about, the 2022 Community Strategic Plan talks about protecting and enhancing our foreshores, which clearly we're not following that strategy. There's no social impact analysis, despite being adjacent to the Great North Walk. The map is faulty. I mean, it's not even properly cadastered. The map wasn't on the website. The easement that I gave Director Karepis the time to correct hasn't been disclosed, and that easement is on page 75 of the submissions and does talk about a public access that has been made, which council isn't enforcing. And I think that answers your question of why don't people access it. It's because that easement is locked on both sides and council hasn't enforced its own easement to unlock the gates. And it hasn't made the path down the unmade part of Serpentine Road. So we've we've been in dereliction of our duty, and as a result, people aren't enjoying part of this walk. And no consultation was made with the relevant authorities like Crown Lands. Nevertheless, 61, I thought, maybe 65 objections make these facts in the public opinion crystal clear that it is not surplus in the public's lands. And so really, if it's not surplus, we can't proceed to sale. And the comment response report on page 30 is not a credible document. A comment that says council is progressing and following its disposal of land policy, and this process is the beginning, is a mockery of the governance principles. And the statement, this submission is not sustained. I give a lot of credit to Alistair for trying to make a meaning out of that. I don't think that means anything at all. I mean, not sustained by who? On what grounds? How is this addressing and mitigating the community's concerns? The idea that we need to do some revenue raising, which I think, Julia and Carol, I agree with you. We really look.
Sorry, Councillor Lane, could you refer to councillors by their titles when you're in the chamber?
Sorry, Councillor Dennis Lehman and Councillor Prieston, thank you. Sorry, I agree with you. This is something that we need to look at, but we're about to give the rugby club in another item a massive free kick worth millions of dollars of operational losses. We haven't done our 4-year CSP and budget process. We have $7 million in reserve. We heard the auditor last session call our council a lazy balance sheet, and we pay 5 times more per kilometre of road repairs than our neighbours. So we have lots of room to move before we need to sell land. And we have no public strategy for balancing the budget, for using public land, for using our future plans. The OLG is watching us in the wings, and it's no wonder that the public trust in this administration is so low. Because we're custodians and not owners, we can't do as we wish with public land. To blithely continue in the face of public sentiment is to make a mockery of the consultation process. So either we can be willfully blind, or there's something else going wrong. And I'm going to borrow a phrase from criminal law for that. Qui bono?
Thank you, Councillor Lane. I might just correct one mischaracterisation there, which is that the public trust is eroded. Our most recent community survey has put us at a 20-year high on public trust for this organisation.
The number one,
Councillor, that wasn't an invitation. Councillors, is there any speakers for the motion? Question, Councillor Vergara.
One of the considerations under policy is where the maintenance of the land is beyond council's reasonable financial capacity. We've heard a lot about policies today, strategic policies, the New South Wales foreshore policy. One of our policies is the Disability Inclusion Action Plan. Under that plan, council is committed to provide support for people with disability. Key principles underlying this commitment are to ensure the full and effective participation and inclusion in society of people with disabilities and accessibility. Council has publicly stated and endorsed the plan of creating universally accessible public spaces. At the moment, 16C Vernon Street is most certainly not accessible in any sense to people in our community with a physical disability.
I'd like to address that because it is quite an important.
Councillor, you can ask a question. Once Councillor Vergara has finished, please.
Sorry, have you finished?
No. It is only barely accessible in a physical sense, not a legal sense, physical sense by people without a disability. And in my view, then, but not safely. So my question is to the director, through you, Mr. to the director, is it feasible for council to construct access which complies with our commitment to disability inclusion action to that standard? And if it is, in your professional opinion, director, is that cost likely to be substantial and beyond our reasonable financial capacity?
General Manager.
I think, well, respectfully through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a very open-ended question because obviously that would need to be scoped, costed appropriately. But I think it's probably more a question for the Director of Infrastructure to answer, but it would cost a significant amount of money to achieve what you're articulating, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, anything is possible, but it would cost a substantial amount of money. And at this stage, there isn't budget for that money. So obviously you will have to look at grant opportunities and so on and so forth. So there's really, there's a decision to be made which path we choose, but the path of keeping it as public open space and compliant with the DIAP is going to cost council a lot of money.
Can I
Councillor Lane.
Can I ask you clarification?
Yes.
If the test for maintaining public ownership is DDA access, are you proposing to sell Woolwich Marina and the Ferdinand Street Reserve that both also are unable to be made accessible because they have steeper grades in their access?
Councillor Lane, not only is
I
that
think,
out of
I think it's relevant to what we're.
Councillor Lane, council does not own the Woolwich Marina.
Oh, sorry, Woolwich Baths.
Yes. That's out of order. It's not relevant to the question.
No, I think it's highly relevant.
Councillor Lane, please.
Oh, look,
Councillor Lane, you have been listened to respectfully, and you have interjected now 4 times when directors are trying to answer questions. Sometimes we'd like to get professional opinions from professional staff that know a little bit about this, who were the authors of these reports. So please, when you are addressing council, be respectful. That's all I ask, because at the moment you are interjecting far too much.
I appreciate, Mr. Mayor Miles, your concerns. I think that the issue here that you've heard from the gallery is that there are some serious issues to be prosecuted. I think if we're unable to follow down some of these ideas, like whether or not DDA access is a red herring, then you're left with the false assumption that this site is somehow unique to Hunters Hill in being unable to be made accessible.
I don't think that DDA access is a red herring, councillor, and I would be very cautious in using that sort of language.
Well,
councillors, is there any speakers for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Prieston.
Can I just clarify
Yes.
something for you, Mr. Mayor, to perhaps the GM? It's irrelevant, but since Councillor Lane brought it up, the access to Woolwich Baths is in no way comparable to the access pathway that's currently at 16C Vernon Street. Otherwise, all councillors should be deemed stupid, quite frankly. I'm not stupid. I distinguish those 2 sites and the access. And it's rude.
It is
And
quite rude.
disrespectful. So
Councillor,
I
do you
just
have a
wanted to
specific
clarify.
question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that we distinguish between the access pathway at the Woolwich Baths as it currently exists.
Yes.
There are multiple access ways actually, and the pathway or the lack thereof that exists at 16C Vernon Street.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Williams, you got a question?
Some disgusting behaviour.
It goes to this issue of accessibility. And we've heard that we need to make the access to Vernon Street accessible. My question is, how many other locations in Hunters Hill do we have fully compliant accessibility to our parks and reserves?
Great question.
Good question, councillor.
Councillor Williams.
Very good question.
We heard here tonight that the
Bedlam Bay.
Bedlam Bay was constrained because of that. It wasn't. It was constrained because of budget.
No, that's
The issue,
Councillors,
in relation to Bedlam Bay was clearly one of deferring that process.
Councillor Williams, do you have a question? Sorry.
Yes. Ask the question.
How many other sites?
In Hunters Hill meet the requirements?
I'll have to go through the professional staff, but as you know, councillor, we have an obligation and a commitment which was adopted by council to make all of those sites accessible over time, and obviously constraining our budget by adding to that list is an obvious issue when you're talking about something that would be a very significant capital cost to the budget on top of the existing non-compliant foreshore accesses that exist in Hunters Hill. General Manager, do you wish to address that?
I think the general question through you, Mr. Mayor, from Councillor Williams, I can't answer that off the top of my head. I'd have to take it on notice. I mean, that's to be asked a question of that scale, that would need investigation. So I'll take it on notice, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillors, any other speakers against the motion? For the motion? Councillor Bergara.
So the test is whether the land is necessary to provide current or future services of the council. It's one of the tests. Woolwich Baths very, very clearly provides services to the community, and a significant number of them. Not all, because it might have accessibility issues, but many, 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 many more than access 16C Vernon Street in its current state. As it currently stands, we do have need to improve access to all our sites. The history of this site on a case-by-case basis is that it was private land until November 2002. It was a ridiculous, I'm going to say, mistake by council to allow a Frankenstein subdivision in 1980, which then resulted in part of the land being rezoned open space, which then led to the owners of lot 31 having a right to force council to acquire it. So it's got a very unusual history. It's not a piece of land that's been public forever. It's one that could have stayed part of the estate, but for the rezoning, which resulted from a very unusual Frankenstein subdivision of a quite historic estate. So on that basis, given its state, given that the money can be used to improve the accessibility of currently used sites like Bedlam Bay, like Woolwich Baths, then this makes sense.
Thank you, councillor.
Mr. Mayor, could I just say two things?
General Manager.
Thank you. First one is, there does seem to be a little bit of confusion I'm picking up on, just so we're clear. Council does not own the boat shed. Let's make that very clear. We do not own the boat shed. Full stop. And the second thing is, as per the recommendation, there is no recommendation before you tonight to sell. It's not what the recommendation is. I think we just need to not lose sight of that.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillor Williams, do you have a question?
A question to the General Manager through you, Mr. Mayor. Do we lease the boat shed?
Yes, we do.
So it could be a public facility.
Potentially, yes.
And do we know who's using it under our lease? at the moment?
We don't have a current lease per se at the moment. We've had a previous lease on it. It is up to us whether we want to renew that lease.
Councillors, Councillor
I can ask
Vergara.
for clarification.
Lots of questions of clarification at the moment.
Attending the site
Yes.
on Saturday, I met a little boy. His name's Bo. He comes from one of the properties adjoining the lot 31. Bo was in the boat shed, was fishing off it. And I asked Bo, you're down here often? He said, yeah, I just live up there. So Bo, how many people do you see down here? He said, no one. So Bo's using the boat shed.
Councillors, any other speakers for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Ternouth-Sleeman, apologies. Right of reply?
That's fine.
No. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Thank you, councillors. Move to item 4.2 on the agenda. Hunters Hill Council Annual Report 2023-2024. Councillors, is there a mover to the motion?
I'm just going to get to it.
Yes, moved. Councillor Ternouth-Sleeman, sorry, Councillor Vergara, seconded Councillor Ternouth-Sleeman. Any discussion? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is, was that against, Councillor Lane? Sorry, that was for.
Just for the minutes. Please just double check what council Lane's vote there is.
That was for.
There was confusion at the last meeting.
For.
Thank you, councillor.
Yes.
Thank you. So that's a unanimous. Yes.
Councillors, item 4.3 on page 246 of the report, the community grants. Is there a move of the motion? Moved, Councillor Prieston, seconded Councillor Ternouth-Sleeman. Any discussion? Councillor Prieston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just really quickly to thank the reporting officer, Annie Goodman, for her work on this. As a beneficiary of multiple local clubs and community facilities over my life, including the Hunters Hill Swimming Club, the Tennis Club, and the Junaid School of Dance, and the All Saints Football Club, and the Gladesville Ravens Football Club, and others. I would like to thank you on behalf of all these amazing organisations for the work that you put in and the advocacy that you have for their continued development and their progression, because it's really beneficial to all different groups of our community to be able to see money going into their organisation, and there's direct outcomes that we get to see as community members. So thank you, and thank you to the other directors for your interest.
Thanks, Councillor Prieston. Any other discussion? For, against? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Vergara.
Yeah, I just wanted to commend council on the considering the retrospective funding for Villa Maria to erect a flagpole to fly the Indigenous flag.
Yes.
I think that is consistent with our reconciliation action plan. So I commend
Thank you, Councillor Vergara. Councillors, any more discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. Councillors, can I just ask, if we are comfortable moving a motion to, because we only have speakers to item 4.5, to move item 4.5 forward. Move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Vergara. Any dissent? If not, put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Sorry, I'll do that again. All those in favour?
Sorry.
Against? That is carried unanimously. We have 3 speakers to item 4.5. The first speaker we have is Alastair Sharp. Thank you, Mr. Sharp. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been following things with the new facility at Bronia Park for quite a number of years. Looking at the business plan for the facility, as far as I can see, it hasn't been updated. So the business plan was based on the idea that the facility would operate with an annual deficit of almost $38,000 a year. It's now proposing that the rugby club's licence fee for use of the building will be reduced by about $20,000 a year. So that means the council will be running at a deficit of about 50 or 60, except that probably that 38,000 has increased in the meantime. Now, the rugby club suggests that this will be compensated for by handing back to council up to 40% of the bookings currently permitted within their draft licence. There's no supporting documentation for this. There's a bit of an estimate, but there's no actual documentation. So in return for dropping the income by $20,000, the Rotary Club says that it would be prepared to forego access to 2 change rooms, first aid room, referee's room, female toilets, male toilets, the lobby, undercroft, canteen, barbecue, store, scrum machine, telco and tank, and 6 bins. There's no explanation of how the club would actually operate without access to such facilities. Perhaps this is explained in attachment 1, except there is no attachment 1. There is no attachment 1 to the business paper. So it's not explained. Also, on the upper level, the rugby club is prepared to lose access to 3 items, including a barbecue. And again, the explanation for this is said to be in attachment 2. And attachment 2 is missing also. Neither does the proposed, neither does the proposal contain information to support statements that the amendments, this is a quote, the amendments to the fees and charges that will allow increased utilisation to the outdoor tiered seating, breezeway, change rooms, public amenities and canteen. So on the basis of the information made available in the business paper, I think you have no option but to reject this recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Sharp. Councillors, any questions? No? Thank you. The second speaker is Jim Sanderson. Thank you, Jim. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Dr. Sharp has covered most of the issues I wanted to cover, but I'd simply make the point that this evening we've made a decision to use public assets for effectively for continuing operations. Here we are sacrificing possible income from continuing operations, and that concerns me. There is the fact that the report is confidential in terms of the calculation that was done to come up with these figures, and that on the surface it would seem that still 60% of the upstairs resources are going to be used, and yet we seem to get a reduction in fees of something of the order of $20,000 a year. I realise that there are some issues to do with the fact that they're aligning with providing the what is specified in the NESROC recommended fees and what should be provided for a Class 1 oval. I'm quite fine with that, but I think it'd be far better if the the information in those calculations were publicly available, so people can genuinely assess how we are treating these important assets.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions, councillors? Oh, thank you. We have our third and last speaker, Beck Ho. If you could come
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes, Beck.
I'll go fast. I'm
Good.
speaking on behalf of all of the clubs, so I'm going to read notes because everyone's contributed. It's the way we go. I'm here and it's great to be here tonight to speak in support of this report and on behalf of the Hunters Hill Rugby Club. For well over a century, our club's been more than just a place to play rugby. It's been a place where friendships are formed, memories are made, and the community comes together. And now, for the first time, we have a home that truly reflects who we are and what we stand for. Over the last few months, we've had a chance to bring our players, supporters, volunteers, and the community together under a real roof and to properly celebrate our community and sport, and it's been brilliant. For us, this isn't just about having new change rooms, a working canteen, or better seating. This is about belonging. It's about giving our juniors a place to dream big, and we're seeing a lot of our juniors on the big field at the moment out playing for the Wallabies, which is awesome. It's about our families having a place to gather and celebrate. It's about having a home, a true home, that can bring together our club and our community. And none of this would have been possible without the incredible partnership we've built over many, many years with Council. We'd like to acknowledge and thank all the councillors who have supported our vision for almost a decade to make this a real outcome. We'd like to also acknowledge the staff who have gone above and beyond to deliver this. Together, we've turned an ambitious vision into reality, and that's something we all can be proud of for a very long time. This facility is proof of what can happen when we work together and trust, respect, and share a commitment to deliver something great for our community. But let's not stop there. Let's make it more than just a facility. Let's make it a destination. Council and the sporting clubs have great plans for how this place will become a significant part of our community, and we're keen to see other community groups utilise the facility, and the changes to the fees and the charges recommended in this report are a more equitable way for us to share this space. So on behalf of everyone at Hunters Hill Rugby, thank you for believing in this vision, for supporting our club, and for giving our community a place to thrive. It's more than a building, it's a legacy, and you should all be really proud of it.
Thank you, Beck. Councillors, councillors, do you have any questions? No. Thanks, Beck.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
General Manager.
If there's no questions from the councillors, just some clarity, I think that's important for the councillors to be aware of before discussing this item in relation to Dr. Shah. There is an attachment 1, but under 2A2C, it's commercial in confidence and was provided to the councillors on a confidential basis, which is in alignment with the Local Government Act. There is an attachment 2, it's the current plans, which is in the report. And secondly, in regards to Mr. Sanson's comments, just so we're very clear here, council has not made a decision tonight to dispose and take revenue from a sale. That's not what happened, and that's very clear in the resolutions of the report.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillors, we have a recommendation on page 285 of the business paper. Is there a mover? Moved. Councillor Tanu-Sleeman, seconded. Councillor Vergara. Councillor Tanu-Sleeman, is there any discussion? No. Councillor Williams.
A question
Yes.
through you, Mr. Mayor, in relation to this confidentiality issue.
Yes.
I've looked at the document and I, for the life of me, cannot understand why it is confidential when we're dealing with a public authority and a community club. We're not dealing with a contractual matter that has commercial in confidence. We're dealing with transparency and providing our community with an understanding of how council is making its decisions and being informed. We haven't had a chance to discuss that material, either in open or in closed council. So the question is, how can we justify this being in closed council when it is clearly an issue of transparency and exposure for the community as to our decision making? And secondly, where is the confidentiality in terms of commercial and confidence associated with a negotiation between a community group and council?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I would assume, and I'll let the General Manager speak, that that we would have sought the requisite legal advice that would have recommended that to go into closed session. And just to be clear, if we do want to discuss that, which I'm open to, we will have to go into confidential session and remove the gallery for the portion of that session. Then we can invite them back in. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, there was no legal advice sought. It's very clear under 2A2C of the Act that this is commercial and confidence information. And if you disagree with that, Councillor Williams, that's your prerogative. But that's the view of my role as the General Manager, and the Director may wish to elaborate on that position.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I after doing numerous reports over the last 20 years of this nature, this is generally the way most councils would do it. Anything discussing the derivation of rental or fees that have been obtained through commercial evaluation are generally done under confidentiality.
Thank you. Councillors, any further discussion?
Just one thing.
General Manager.
Yeah, one thing I'd also like to add, Mr. Mayor, with the greatest respect, if there is a direction from council how to deal with this matter post tonight, that should not be discussed in open council when we have benchmarks, commercial and confidence figures, as alluded to by the Director. If you want to discuss it, that's quite within your prerogative, but it will need to be in closed session in my advice to you.
Yes, thank you, General Manager, and we will take it. Councillors, any further discussion on this matter?
Yeah, my question is sort of to the General Manager, is he saying we can't discuss this matter without being in closed session?
That is the strong advice that you've just heard from the General Manager.
Just for clarity, Mr. Mayor, that's not what I'm saying, Councillor Williams. There is a section under the Code of Conduct about belittling comments. So just to be clear, if you want to discuss the general basis of the paper, that's fine. But if you want to ask specific questions about the calculations and benchmarks against other facilities, that would need to be in closed session. And the reason for that is you may give us a different direction where you don't want to be discussing that in front of the club representatives in an open council meeting. You don't. It's called a commercial negotiation. Whether it's a community club or not, it's ultimately a negotiation that has commercial and confidence grounds. Pretty straightforward.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillors, is there any further discussion on this matter? For? Against? Councillors, I would ask you to pose your questions through the chair.
Yeah, it's not a question, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak against it because I don't understand the rationale behind what we're doing here. We entered into original negotiations based on certain parameters. Now those parameters seem to be changing. And I've got to be careful here, I suppose, because everybody's watching. But we've heard the issue that it's only changed by 40%, but we're changing the overall result by close to 80%. So to me, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the information here to be able to understand the reasoning behind this decision. I think it's, I think we should go into closed session, but
if you wish to go into closed session, we can.
Sorry?
If you wish to go into closed session, we can. You just need to move the motion. I can't do it from the chair.
Yeah, well, let's go into closed session.
Yes, moved. Councillor Williams, seconded. Councillor Lane, all those in favour of going into closed session? Against? I'll do that one more time. All those in favour of going into closed session? Against? Against. Thank you. Sorry, just to be clear to members of the gallery, if you wish to stay while we discuss this, you can come back into council, but I can't guarantee you how long we'll be here for. But we do have a number of other matters to consider in open council after this. I will get